broken down along a busy highway.
This is the Sheriff's Department. Get your hands up.
A woman ordered out of her vehicle.
Hands up! I'm walking back towards me.
But this tense, high-stake moment all caught on dashcam is no arrest. It's a rescue.
She was abducted from her residence last night sometime.
A nightmare that lasted for 18 hours had finally come to an end.
The suspect took off on foot.
Now, for the first time, this brave survivor and mother of 4 is telling her harrowing story. At home on her farm, Jenna Schiller is best known as Mom. But on roller skates, she's Laceration Lizzie.
I was roller skating with Fergus Falls Roller Girls.
Despite 4 kids and a full-time job, the single mom managed to find time for her favorite sport.
This is something you did for you, something you enjoyed doing.
Yeah, very much.
What she didn't have time for was finding a man.
I'd been through many relationships. It was a little nerve-wracking to put yourself out there again.
But in 2011, a man found her.
He was fun. He was looking for a committed relationship.
And for Dennis Austin, Jenna's 4 kids weren't a deal breaker. They were a bonus.
He enjoyed doing stuff as a family and being around my kids. Moved in almost immediately.
Like most new couples, all their free time was spent together. And when they were apart, Dennis made sure to keep in constant contact.
He would call and text all the time. I thought he was very attentive and just loved me. And
Dennis soon dubbed himself Mr. Laceration Lizzie and was ringside for every roller derby match.
he thought it was so cool that I did that, and it was so awesome.
And he was your, quote, #1 fan.
Yes.
But Jenna's #1 fan was starting to act more like a fanatic.
And when fans would want to take pictures with me, he would call me names. He would tell me I looked like a and a.
Dennis quickly went from being needy to controlling. Then soon, something far worse.
And probably after that is when it started with the jealousy, always asking me like who I was with or who was around.
Dennis had plenty of excuses for his jealousy, and Jenna says she bought into every single one of them.
He had been in relationships where he was cheated on or lied to, or people weren't there for him, or he had issues with his parents. He didn't feel loved, so I just thought I could be that person.
But when the verbal abuse became physical, loving Dennis became difficult. He even took the fun out of roller derby.
It resulted in verbal abuse, physical abuse.
In front of others?
Yeah. He would hit me. He slammed my foot in the door at the hotel, ripped my toenail off my foot.
If her team traveled out of town for a match, Dennis would tag along. One time, he left her in Wisconsin with no way to get home.
He took my money, my car. I had to go sit at a restaurant for about 6 hours to wait for him to come back and get me.
The violence got so bad one night at home, Jenna did call the police.
I needed to stop him from what he was doing.
But because Jenna lived so far out in the country, when cops finally arrived, Dennis was long gone.
They asked about the marks, and I told them that it wasn't from him. And they knew that I was lying, but they can't do anything about it.
There was times I saw marks on her, and I'd asked her about them. Said she tried to kind of play it off and say, oh, it was nothing, it's okay, like, you know, don't worry about it.
As bad as the abuse got, it's not what finally convinced Jenna to break up with Dennis. It was something else.
I had been in abusive relationships before, so that seemed normal to me.
One day, police called asking if she recognized a particular phone number. Turns out, it belonged to Dennis.
He had been taking my contacts and places I used to work and friends of mine and family and calling them in the middle of the night.
When they'd answer, Jenna says Dennis would make sexually explicit comments.
I was completely shocked. He came clean about it, sort of, and said that this was something that he had a problem with and that he had done in the past.
From that moment on, she was done with the relationship.
I didn't feel connected to him at that point. He withdrew. He spent a lot of time outside or in the garage. And then when we would have altercations, they would get bigger and worse.
After repeated attempts to get him to move out, Dennis was finally gone. But he certainly wasn't giving up.
Were you hearing from him?
Oh yeah, he never would stop calling.
30, 40, 50 times a day?
Minimum.
He even started breaking into her house. Jenna got a restraining order, but Dennis never saw it.
They have to have a physical address to be served, and he didn't have a physical address.
Worried for her safety, Jenna's boss begged her to move in with her family.
I said I wasn't leaving my house, and I wasn't going to run away, and I was going to stand my ground.
It's a decision that would nearly cost Jenna her life.
I went into the kitchen and went to the light switch to go turn it on, and he was standing right there.
On the night of May 16th, 2012, Jenna enjoyed a girls' night out with friends.
I came home by myself. My kids were gone. They were staying with my sister.
Around 2 in the morning, the mother of 4 came through her back door and turned on the kitchen light.
He was standing right there.
Dennis had broken into her house again.
He just immediately started punching me in the face. He grabbed me and started strangling me.
What did you do?
I was crying. I asked him to stop. I asked him why he was doing this.
Jenna recounts the horrifying 18-hour ordeal exclusively with Crime Watch Daily, saying after he beat her for a couple hours, he threw her into her SUV and took off.
Is he talking to you during this time?
Telling me to give him my phone to put in the passcode so he can see who I've been talking to. He said he was gonna find anybody who I was with or talked to and track them down and kill them.
At one point, Jenna tried making an escape.
I finally decided, after seeing a house with their lights on outside, to jump out of the vehicle.
But the house wasn't as close as she thought. And Jenna was now seriously injured.
I had hit the ground going fast enough and hard enough that I had like road rash from the gravel over most of my body.
Before she could yell for help, Dennis dragged her back into the SUV, then returned to her house.
He laid me down in my bed. My head was bleeding profusely.
Eventually, Jenna passed out, but the abuse didn't stop.
I woke up to him punching me and kicking me and strangling me.
Worried her kids would soon be home, just before sunrise, Dennis threw Jenna back into the SUV. She was now too badly injured to attempt an escape, even when they stopped for gas.
I didn't think that I would be able to get away before he would notice.
When she didn't show up for work that morning, Jenna's boss called police, who went to her house to check on her.
They found out that my front door had been broken in. He kicked in the door.
Inside, cops found blood in her bed and bathroom. Before long, an all-out search was underway for both Jenna and Dennis.
Were you afraid for her life?
Yes.
During the time when your sister was missing, what were you doing?
Trying to call her, trying to call him.
But the calls went straight to voicemail.
He had had both of our phones taken apart.
By late afternoon, Jenna says Dennis had calmed down following a bizarre incident.
He was hyperventilating and telling me that he was having a heart attack. He started calling me by a different name, was completely different.
He even agreed to let her make a brief phone call to her sister.
She immediately said that there was a missing persons report, that the police were at my house, that they were looking for us.
Jenna was relieved to learn cops were searching for them, and even more relieved when just before 8 in the evening, the engine on her SUV blew up. The terrifying trip had would come to an abrupt end, and so would her long nightmare.
He just looked at me and told me that he loved me. He told me that he loved my kids. And he got out of the car and walked away.
Minutes later, Jenna was on the phone with her family when deputies pulled up behind her.
They came out with their guns and the loudspeaker.
This is the sheriff's department. Get your hands up.
I was frozen in fear. I've never had so many guns pointed at me in my life.
Hands up. Come walking back towards me.
The badly beaten mother of four, seen here on dashcam video, slowly emerged from the vehicle and limped over to cops. The horror of what she'd been through becoming more and more clear with every painful step.
Come on, keep coming. Where's he at? He left? In a vehicle or walking?
He went walking and hit the right.
Was he walking down that way?
At first, Jenna seemed surprisingly calm considering the terror she'd endured over the last 18 hours. But as deputies moved in to search her vehicle, the trauma started to sink in and Jenna was overcome with emotion.
Can you stand up for me? And I just want to try and document as much as I can of what happened to you here.
These pictures taken alongside the highway are only a glimpse into the pain that had been inflicted on her. Road rash all over her body, her eyes swollen shut, chin busted, and blood from a gash in her head left her hair badly matted. While cops were tending to Jenna, the man who'd nearly killed her made his escape.
Did he cross the highway at all, or did he just keep going south?
I don't know. I wasn't really thinking.
The manhunt to find Dennis Austin lasted for days, and the entire time he was still berating Jenna with a barrage of text messages.
He ended up calling a friend of mine and asking her to help him.
With cops hiding nearby, Jenna's friend met Dennis in the Twin Cities area.
Before he got into our vehicle, the police arrested him.
After 5 days on the run, Dennis was finally behind bars. And even then, he continued to call Jenna.
I was going to talk about the phone calls. It's my understanding that the judge ordered a condition that you had no contact with her.
Well, when I called her, with my 3 minutes was before I even got served with the papers.
Right, but there were other calls afterwards. There were several calls to her work number itself.
I thought it was my buddy's number because they're both similar.
Dennis eventually agreed to plead guilty. He was convicted of kidnapping to commit great bodily harm and burglary. He'll be out of prison in 2024.
Is it long enough?
No. I don't think that he is mentally capable of not being in prison.
Are you afraid for your safety?
Yeah.
Long after her physical injuries had healed, Jenna suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
I couldn't go back to work. I had a hard time sleeping. I couldn't be around anything loud. I always saw something on my peripheral vision.
Support from the group Break the Silence is what ultimately led to a breakthrough.
What would you say to someone else, male or female, who finds themselves in the type of relationship you were in?
I would just say that it's important to get out before it gets worse, because it will get worse. There's a lot of people that understand and that will support you.
One of Jenna's biggest supporters, a teacher she met a few months after her kidnapping.
It was very difficult to let go and to let somebody in.
But eventually, she did.
And you were married this year.
Yes, I got married this year.
And blended both of your families officially.
Yes.
So 6 kids.
Yeah.
There is a happy ending to this story,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Mm-hmm.